Let's talk about grief. It's a topic that no one wants to mention, and yet so many people need help in this area. I wish I didn't know anything about it. I wish I didn't have any information. I wish I have not had a lifetime of grief, but I have. And I've learned how to navigate it, and you have to. You can't just wish it away. It won't go away. The longer you don't deal with something, the more opportunity it has to overcome you. And what you don't overcome in life will overcome you. So let's hit it head on. All kinds of grief people deal with. Of course, most of you watching know that we had to bury our 6-year-old daughter with a brain tumor when she was diagnosed at 5, and 11 months she lived. But on November 23rd, 1999, she took her last breath here and her first breath in eternity. And as great and freeing and awesome and wonderful as that was for her, as the Lord says, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints, how awesome it is for him, it's hell for those of us left behind. And stories like David told in Psalm 23, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, they become very familiar to you. That particular psalm became a revelation for me, because all my life I thought when people die, they walk through the valley of the shadow of death. No. One breath here, the next breath there. No shadow of death. But those of us left behind, when you walk a person to the edge and they cross over, guess what? You're left here. And you're devastated, and now you have to turn around and walk back through the valley of the shadow of death, and you have to figure out how to live again, and you have to figure out how to move on, and you're going to go through all kinds of different stages. There are many. Now, maybe you're not grieving over the loss of a loved one or a mate or a child or a parent. Maybe you're grieving over a lost dream, or maybe you're grieving over a lost marriage, and all of that grief is legitimate, but they're not always the same. And so don't compare your journey with other people, and don't ever say, someday I'm going to do a video on the stupid things people say to you when you're hurting, but don't ever say, I know what you're going through, because the truth is, if 100 people lost their child and you're all talking, not a one of you know what the other one's going through, because we're all unique and our journeys are different. And that's why sometimes counseling helps and sometimes it doesn't, because it's not a textbook journey. It's personal. It's yours. It's unique. And don't let anybody rush you. People say after a while, just snap out of it. Well, I can't snap out of it. I didn't snap into it. Give me time, I'll figure it out, and I'll make my way. But the truth is, you'll never come out, because unless that loved one or what you've lost is coming back, you can't come out of it. You have to learn to live with it. My husband gives the best analogy, I think. He said it's like you're a great golfer and something happens and you lose your pinky finger. Will you golf again? Probably, but you won't golf like you did. You'll have to learn how to golf with one less digit. And so that's kind of what grief is like. Stop looking for you to be who you were. You're going to be different, because you'll always have this thing that's changed you. And so the best thing is to stop looking for it to get better and learn how to be better at managing it. The situation may not get better, but you can get better at managing it. You can get better at moving on. You can get better at confronting and or journeying through what I call the landmines of emotions and navigating the waters of the landmines, things that set you off. Don't keep going back and doing the same thing that puts you in the pit. Don't do that until you get better. And if you get better, you might can try it again, but you might never be able to go to the cemetery. You might never be able to look at that particular photograph or watch that particular video. You may never have to be to the place where you can do those things. And so give yourself a break, first of all, in grief. Just breathe today and get up and make it through the day and lay down. And then tomorrow, your goal is to get up and go through the day and the next day. And maybe I'm going to make it for a whole week and then a month. And then before you know it, a year has passed. And you're still going to know it. You're still going to be in grief. It's never going to poof and it's gone. How could it? And here's the thing about your loved ones. Your loved ones will always be your loved ones. So if they're in heaven, they're in your future. And so stop talking about them like they've poofed or vanished or don't exist anymore. I refuse to say Gabrielle was this way. She is, actually more is than she ever will be on the earth. More is than I will ever be. So let's talk about some stages of grief. The first one is denial. Some people call it shock, depending on your situation. I actually went into this while Gabrielle was sick. I was denying my emotions, the ability to even fathom that she could die. And because of that, I put it off. I put grief off through my denial. And then another stage is anger. People get mad about it. They get angry about it, and they're going to put that anger on somebody. Sometimes you put it on yourself. Sometimes you put it on the doctors or the nurses or a friend, or you have to be careful you don't put it on your mate, your children, the people you're the closest to, because they're grieving too. You have to figure out how to let the anger come out and don't push it down, because when you stuff your emotions, you get sick. I know, I had colon cancer after our daughter died because I was stuffing my emotions instead of yelling and screaming and dealing with it. And I thought yelling and screaming and dealing with it was weakness. I now realize it is not. Some people just need to yell, scream, and deal with it. And then others have to pace themselves. And you have to figure out what works for you. There is no real formula. You have to find what works for you, and then you just start working the situation. Another one is bargaining. Wow, was I ever there with God? I remember about 3 or 4 months into it, by the time I thought she would be healed by now, by the time I just knew that she was going to be well, she was actually getting worse every day, every week, every month. The situation became more dire. And so then I began to bargain with God. God, I have had so many miracles. I'll give every one of them back if you will just give me this one. I started bargaining with God, and that's a normal process of grief. So really and truly, I started grieving even before she passed. And I didn't realize it until I started studying the pattern of grief. And sometimes if you're not careful, if you don't deal with your emotions, if you don't grieve properly, you just keep circling the same issue and the same situation. You've got to learn how to navigate and move forward or move upward in your circle at least, so that you don't get stuck. Another level of grief is depression. When you can't get up, when you don't want to get out of bed, when you don't want to get ready anymore, when you don't want to live. I hit that one too. Most everybody does. It can last for a few days for some people, and for others a few years. If I didn't fight it, I'd still be in it. But I fight it because I fight the good fight of faith. And I walk the walk instead of just talk the talk. Because you have to deal with the situation every day. And then there comes the last stage of grief. And to me, this was the one, it's called acceptance. And this was the one when the Lord started talking to me about stop asking the questions of why. That I was putting myself in a prison of questions of why. And finally, he had me, I'm a researcher by nature, and I love the word, but I had a really hard time reading the word right after. I didn't want to worship. I didn't want to sing. I didn't want to write any new songs. Didn't want to write a book. I didn't want to do anything creative because I was shut down. And I finally accepted the fact that she's not coming back. And I remembered the scripture where David was dealing with the death of his son. And he said, he's not coming back to me, but I can go to him. And really and truly, what the Lord spoke in my spirit at that time was he said, Gabrielle is not in your past, but she is, present tense, is in your future. And what that really said, the acceptance of that was, see her alive and well and whole and move forward. You don't have to live your life looking back, because the truth is, when driving down the road of life, rip off the rearview mirror. You know those mirrors, you look into them, sometimes they're on your left when you're driving, sometimes it's a rearview mirror, and right at the bottom it'll say things like, things may be closer than they appear, or they may look bigger than they are. Sometimes when you're looking in the rearview mirror, your perspective is not accurate. Things are not always as they appear. But when you're looking forward, things are exactly as they appear. So I encourage you, push through the stages. Don't deny any one of them. Just keep moving. And remember, God's got a plan for you that's bigger than the journey you're having to navigate right now. He has a hope and a future and a plan, and He's not done with you yet. If you were baked, you would be there already, but you're not finished yet. And let's just keep moving forward in the journey. So some of those stages are shock and denial. And what are some of the emotions going to be? Disbelief, not wanting to move forward, don't know how to restore things back to normal. Another one, anger and depression, feeling bitter, feeling resentful, asking questions of why, wanting to blame somebody. I went through that one. I blamed the doctors and the nurses and the treatment that we were using. Everybody is going to go through that stage. Just try not to blame you or God or your family, because they're grieving too. Then release and honor becomes a great step. When you finally release the grief and you begin to honor the one that you've lost, or the situation that you've lost. And what does honor mean in the Hebrew? It means to open the door. Open the door to the future. Open the door to the fact that your loved one may not be with you right this moment, but you can honor them and move into the future and join them very quickly. Jesus is coming. We've got to be ready. We're moving forward. And then finally, return to love. We wrote 2 books on grief. The first one was called From Morning to Morning. The only difference in M-O-R-N-I-N-G and M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, the only difference is you. You determine when the joy of the morning comes back by how fast you journey through your grief. And the second one we wrote was From Grief to Glory, Rediscovering Life After Loss. You don't have to live in the place of loss forever. You can rediscover how to live again, how to move on, how not to feel guilty about laughing or having a party. It's time to live again. It may not be right away, but you'll know when it's time to live again. And you're going to want to resist it. But for your sake and your families and those who love you, really work hard at living again, because you're still here. And sometimes when we focus on who we don't have, we lose who we do have. Sometimes when we focus on what we don't have, we lose what we do have. Let's learn to focus on who's with us and on our situations, and let's move forward into eternity with no such earthly minded anymore. Become heavenly minded with a future and a hope. I pray this helps you today. Watch it over and over and over if you need to. And know this one thing. I would never presume to say to you, I know how you're feeling, but I know how I felt. And I needed somebody to tell me that I was never going to be who I was, but that I could be a new, improved me and learn from the journey. So learn from the journey, and let's move forward together. God bless you today.